Welcome back to Emirates 24/7. Right now you're consuming the planet's most popular form of entertainment, with more and more TV channels on offer every year.
But with so much content beamed across the Arab world, it's of little surprise that content regulation can be a confusing issue, as seen recently with Etisalat stopping the pan-Arab broadcast of a US hit TV show.
Now, with the TV sector set to grow further and develop with new technologies, future content concerns are likely. To tell us more about how broadcasters operate and how the sector is expected to develop is Nick Grande, the managing director of the ChannelSculptor company. Welcome to the show.
Many thanks, Omar.
Thank you for joining us. Now, looking, of course, at that issue that Etisalat had with the show Game of Thrones, it was taken off temporarily due to offensive content. Now it's been put back in, but it can be a little bit of a confusing situation for some of the viewers out there as to how the regulations really work. Can you tell us a little bit about how TV sort of content is regulated currently, both obviously within the regional area in the GCC, but also across the pan-Arab audiences too?
Yeah, well, you allude to the first important point is that most television is pan-Arab. So it presents a challenge because you're looking at multiple audiences, 23 countries under the Nilesat and Arabsat beams. The UAE in particular is a home to many of those TV channels, and for broadcasters that choose to host themselves in the UAE, there's a regulatory framework available to them here. And I believe it's the National Media Council that sets the frame, and then organisations like TCOM that provide a lot of the more detail from a regulatory framework. But then you also have self-regulation. So you take Etisalat as an example. They would have to look at programming going out on air and make a decision very much on the fly sometimes as to whether it's appropriate to the audience. And Etisalat is a little different in the sense that they are effectively a utility provider in many ways. They're much more prevalent in internet provision, telephones, not only TV. So they don't necessarily have that invited guest kind of quality that you associate with a pay TV network.
Sure.
Now, we received a statement from OSN earlier saying that they actually adhere to broadcast regulations across the region and that they follow the same censorship rules as the British Board of Film Classification. And it does make you wonder why a Gulf organisation might be following the same regulations that a British one does.
Well, it's a challenge for anybody. I mean, I think one thing to keep in mind is that Game of Thrones is a really unusual proposition. It's an incredibly high-rated show. And at the same time, it's covering themes that are very attractive to children, teenage boys and girls, and yet it's got adult themes running through it at the same time, which can be extremely concerning for parents. I think it's a bit of a one-off in that respect. It's not every day that you come across a show that is combining, swords and sorcery with much more adult themes. But I think for OSN, as for any pan-regional broadcaster, they need to have freedom to operate over multiple countries, but at the same time they will work very closely with TCOM, I'm sure, and with the National Media Council to make sure that they are working within that frame. But I can understand that position of wanting to keep editorial integrity at a regional level, not only to UAE level.
Sure. I mean, looking though obviously at that concept of greater Arab regulation, or in fact a pan-Arab regulatory body when it comes to television content. Obviously, we're seeing that in the case of the OSN, they do take some cues from the UK, obviously a longer, more established television market. What stage are we at when it comes to something which is more targeted towards us here, and in fact a pan-GCC, pan-Arab regulatory framework? Is it a situation where conflicts between sort of government policy will cause issues, or is this something that we might actually see at some point soon?
There have been several attempts to create a pan-Arab regulatory framework, and it shouldn't come as a surprise. It's been difficult. I mean, you don't see many regulatory frameworks around the world. I mean, I'm sure that the European Union is trying hard to regulate and standardize themes, but I think if you compare German content, for example, with British content, again, there'd be big differences in terms of the tastes. It is a challenge. I think to some extent technology will come to our rescue a little bit, because what I would hope to see more and more is domestic and I suppose what you call partitioned, or no, better expression would be audience-tailored content. So and not simply from a censorship point of view, but also from a point of view of what people actually want to see from a cultural standpoint as well. So if you are, Game of Thrones is a pretty universal show, but if you are looking for Carolan programming, for example, or Emirati programming, you know, at the moment you kind of got to deal with a lot of North African programming and so forth as well, which might not be that relevant to you. So I think domestic broadcast options through IPTV, through OTT will be good, not only from a regulatory point of view, but from an audience point of view in terms of giving people what they actually want.
Sure. And looking at, you mentioned, of course, OTT, the online television. Looking at that in particular, how do you think that's going to impact how the television industry sort of evolves here in the region, how advertisers operate when it comes to TV, and the kind of production we're going to see here, more generally?
Well, I think the first thing is it'll give much more transparency. Audience measurement will be a lot easier when you have what's called a return path. I mean, an online environment allows you to communicate in both directions, and so for the first time you actually get a sense of how many people are watching your shows. You can pick shows that are much more popular to your audience. And I mean, we're already seeing trends. I mean, back to OSN, I mean, they actually just launched their OTT platform, and I think seeing that happen, I think is a good thing. It points towards development there. Similarly, of course, Etisalat and do have their own OTT and IPTV platforms, and so it'll help audience measurement. It'll help advertisers because it'll mean that they can actually advertise to their markets. At the moment, with an advertising play on pan-regional television, you buy Saudi, you get the rest of the region for free. So wouldn't it be great from an advertiser's point of view to be able to say, right, I want to reach this particular audience in this particular country or in these countries, and know that they were getting that. And from the broadcaster's point of view, they monetize 3, 4, 5, maybe even 10 times the same content. So there's much more money in the system, which should improve the quality of programming, especially locally made programming. So much of the programming here is imported still, and it'd be great to see more being locally made.
Well, of course, as a locally made television show, we absolutely agree. Nick, thank you so much for joining us on the show. Pleasure having you.
It's great to be here. Thanks.
Thank you.
All right, we're going to take a short break.